Hello and welcome back to What's New with Mead. I'm your host, Man-Made Mead. Today we're on episode number 15 and I'm doing something a little different. I normally have a topic. Today I'm going to be going through the Reddit. So there's a large video element to this. If you want to see the video version of this, go check out youtube.com and find Man-Made Mead Extras and you'll see the video version of this if you're just listening to the audio. So I'm going to be scrolling through the Reddit, Mead, r/Mead Reddit, and discussing some things I see on here as because I think it's interesting and I learn a lot from it, and I think you would too. It's definitely a great resource for mead making. So go check it out if you're interested. Of course, I'm drinking some stuff. I'm not even going to dive into it. It's a Chaucer's mead that I just did a mead review of on this channel. So I don't know when that will be out, but it'll be out at some point. So let's go ahead and, well, I'll tell you a little about it. It's a sparkling mead. Normally Chaucer's makes a, I guess traditional mead, and it's one of the big tall bottles that you see in a lot of these liquor stores. Anyways, my opinion is not very good. I saw this bottle in my local liquor store and thought, why not try it? It's really not too bad. It's ginger and orange. It's very, the ginger is very, very prominent. The orange is there too. I do wish that it had a little more honey character. But I'm not here to dive too deep into that. I just want to dive into some Reddit things. So first things, I'm just going to scroll down the Reddit. And when something hits me, I will gladly stop and answer some things. So the first thing I'm looking at is first time sizer questions, stupid high ABV. Oh, there it is. Okay. He says he made a sizer, excuse me, that went to 1.160. Whenever you're making a mead, you can make a high gravity mead and it'd be just fine. That's pretty normal, actually. The thing to know about a high gravity mead is that high gravity meads have needs, as I'll say. So if you're going to do that, you need to be supplying it with enough nutrient, whether that's diammonium phosphate or DAP, or Fermate O, Fermate K, something like that to help it out. A lot of people are anti nutrients, and I think that is okay if you're doing something that's a manageable ABV. Stuff that gets to 1.160 is sitting up at 18, 19, 20%. That's not quite manageable. I mean, it is by some yeast, but it's not normally something you just let go. There are lots of yeasts that get up to or to get up to 18%. However, in this case, I would highly recommend using some nutrients. So he is making this sizer. I actually just started a sizer today. I make my man-made sizer, as I call it, and I normally do, in let's say a 6-gallon batch, I have 4 gallons of apple juice, about 1.5 gallons, maybe 1 3/4 of water, and then 3 to 4 pounds of honey. That gets me up to like 1.050. So I don't really push the bounds of that. I think that too boozy of a sizer is just so in your face. Like, why on earth do you want something that is 18, 19, 20%? Even for somebody who's like a heavyweight, an 18% is still very heavy. And while it's nice to like just have one bottle, walk away and not have to drink anything else, it's also like, are you enjoying it? Are you able to get the true characteristics out of an 18, 19, 20% mead? Maybe. The other problem with those is they take forever to age. Holy cow. If you're making something that's with that high of a gravity, you're probably having to age it for a long time. So I'm going to keep scrolling. This guy says, finished my first batch, smells very, quote, bready and somewhat alcoholic. Is that a good sign? If you've ever made mead, you might have noted that same thing. A young mead, because the yeast are still within the mead, will smell and taste bready. And that's because yeast have a natural bready taste to them. And then somewhat alcoholic. Yeah, you have an alcohol burn because alcohol does burn and gets smoother over time. That's kind of why a lot of people are, I'll say a lot of people, I think it's important that you age your meads for plenty of time, because at the end of the day, if you're not aging your mead, you're not letting the characters meld. And most of the time, meads need the time for the character to meld, whatever you're doing, especially higher gravity stuff. So make sure you do that. So to answer that person, I know people are not necessarily asking me these things. I'm just looking through the Reddit because I think it's fun. This is my first brew ever. I think I added too much honey though. I would love to know how much honey they added. Also, I have been doing a bunch of mead related things today, and my floor is very sticky because I was racking something over and was not paying attention, and per usual just flooded the ground. So I have to mop after this, which will be interesting. Oh, this guy, that's not a big. He says, this is my first brew ever. I think I added too much honey though. He put 4 pounds of honey in, which I hope that if you're listening to this and maybe by chance, if this is your Reddit question, please don't think that I'm shaming you by any means. I don't mean to. That's not my goal. I think everybody goes through this process of figuring out how to brew and has questions. In fact, I encourage it. If you are making a mead or beer or wine or cider and you have questions, just ask them. Don't be afraid to ask and be shamed into some like corner to say like, oh, you're an idiot for asking this question. That's silly. This community is really nice, and I think we're all here to help everybody get better at what we're doing, and we can learn from one another. So he put 4 pounds of honey in, and that's definitely not too much. I have put 4 pounds of honey into plenty of things. In fact, my favorite bochet, maybe not my favorite by amount of time aged is my original bochet that I made, which is now 3 years old. That's essentially it, or no, not 3, maybe 2.5 years old. Had 4 pounds of honey in it. So it was mega sweet and pretty boozy, but time has helped it. 4 pounds of honey only got me up to like, for that 1 gallon, got me up to maybe 1.130, somewhere in that realm. And then I had residual sweetness. So it's a big, hefty mead. However, at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. Our next Reddit question is from Ultha Deer. I haven't been saying names so far. Sorry if I'm calling you out or not saying your name. He says, when and how should I add spices to my mead? I've been making a simple sack mead for years now. It's a little sweet, holds the taste of honey well, and a big hit among friends. I want to expand my mead making, and I am looking at making a simple spiced mead, hopefully for Christmas. My inclination is to add some nutmeg and vanilla to the mead. I have been nervous to do so, and I currently have about 4 gallons or so of sack mead completed. It is finished fermenting, and I'd regularly bottle it. What would be the best way to add the above mentioned spices? He says, one way I've heard of is an infusion, a number of vanilla beans cut and open, put and sealed, and filled with whatever, infusion. Okay, his question is, how do you add spices to a mead? Which is a great question. Spices can be kind of difficult to use. In my experience, the best time to do them is in the secondary, because it's the most controlled time. Unless you have a lot of experience with a specific spice and you know exactly how much to add, I would not be just throwing it into the primary. It is very, very hard to pull things out of a mead where you can always add things. So in the secondary, I would add this into the secondary. I would take your sack mead, which for anyone wondering is a very sweet mead. I think it's funny he said it's a little sweet. It should be very sweet because sack meads are intended to be super sweet. They're kind of like a dessert mead in a way. Anyways, I would go ahead and take your sack mead, and in that secondary, like he has here, I have found you can put your spices in by just throwing them on top, and they'll impart into the mead however much you want to add in. However, I've been making little bags of spices of things in the past, of hops and not necessarily cinnamon sticks, but some other things. And putting them into a tiny bag, putting like a marble or something inside so that that bag floats to the bottom and therefore hopefully imparts a little more flavor. So that's what I would do. If you're gonna make a mead with spices and you're not super comfortable with the ratios, go ahead and wait till the secondary. Add a little bit at a time, because remember, you can always add more spices later. You can always add more flavors later. You can't quite do it early. You can't take things out. So him mentioning about doing an infusion and essentially adding that infusion in could also be a good option. So, I don't know. I would definitely try. Ooh, this one seems interesting. I would definitely try putting it in secondary. Anyone make this is from 96 Fat Boy, which is an interesting name. Anyone make a capsule using ancho, chipotle, and cocoa nibs? I'm thinking about making a capsule next. Anyone done a batch with nacho, chipotle, or cocoa nibs? I think in my way. That could be really interesting. Making like a very rich but spicy kind of mead. I do think that could work really well. I would try, like maybe a chipotle pepper could be really good. I've used cocoa nibs a lot in meads. I have a vanilla bean and cocoa. Well, yeah, I'll say a bochet with cocoa nibs and vanilla bean in it, and I call it the OK bochet. It's pretty good. It adds some mouthfeel, adds some body to that mead in general. Of course, adds some of the chocolatey taste that you want. If you were to contrast that with some sweetness / a little heat, I think that could be really, really good. So maybe something, you don't even have to dip into the bochet realm. You could just make a straight up traditional mead, add your cocoa nibs in that secondary, and add, well, I'll say this. I would do things in stages in this case. I would make a traditional mead. I would first want to try to instill the chocolate flavor. So I would add my cocoa nibs in, get them to a comfortable point where I feel like the chocolate flavor is strong enough and I'm content with that. Then I would add maybe, let's say, he says ancho or chipotle, like pepper. You could add your pepper in, and in that, not secondary, you're past the secondary at that point, in your post-secondary, and taste test it regularly until you get to the point where you are comfortable with the taste of it. The trick to using or making a capsule is the seeds. If you want to have a hotter mead that's less vegetably tasting, you're going to want to keep the seeds in. So whatever pepper you're using, jalapeno, chipotle, ancho, habanero, those seeds retain a lot of the heat, and that's important to know. So if you're wanting to do that, make sure you use your seeds. And I will note that over time, heat can decay from a mead. And so if you are planning on long-term aging your mead, you can almost go a little bit hotter, and then that should over time cool down, so to speak. Heat does not get stronger over time from my understanding and from my experience. But that's, again, my experience. You can take it as you will. That's what I've been through. Let's see. This guy says, second full day into my first batch. So many bubbles. Question, how do I know if/when to add nutrients? Or is the fruit sufficient for now? It looks like to me he's making some sort of berry mead, maybe a blueberry, something along that lines. And stuff floating at the top. Looks like he's put raisins in. Anyways, he is asking, when do you add nutrients? There's a couple different ways you can add nutrients. You can... Well, let's talk about the different nutrients you can add in general. There's stuff like diammonium phosphate. I think I'm saying that right. That's also called DAP. And if you add that in, that's a sort of nutrient for yeast. And it kind of, if you follow the TOSNA protocol, that gets into a whole, I'll have to make another podcast about that, but that's a whole nother world. So there's DAP, and then there's stuff like Fermaid K, Fermaid O, that is a little, has some different roles. Fermaid, I get them switched around, but I think Fermaid K is stuff you put in before the fermentation with the yeast, and Fermaid O is what you put in the actually as yeast nutrient. Anyways, those are some options for yeast nutrients, and you can put them all in the beginning, which is fine. I equate it to if you were to make a Thanksgiving feast and then you just eat leftovers for the next 2 weeks. Or you can do a staggered nutrient schedule, which is where you put in part of your nutrients at day 0, 2, 4, 6, and that's it. So you're quartering your nutrients, you're adding them at those days, and that step feeds the brew. That's the better way to do it, in my opinion. If you have the time and you have the ability to remember to do those things, then I would suggest a staggered nutrient schedule. However, I get lazy a lot of times, and I'll just go ahead and put all my stuff in just at the same time. I heard a little bitty crack, and I think I use a jar for a really big 2-gallon jar for holding my sanitized water. I think when I put my lid back on, I put it on too strong somehow, maybe, because I heard like a crack and there's like a leaking. There's a big old crack in it now. So I don't know. I think I just broke something. This podcast is going very well, if you can't tell. Let's see. Ooh, speaking of the feeling of finding big glass vessels, oh, that's so sad. It's so very reminiscent of my struggles currently. So let's see. I'm going to go over now to dragon fruit and peach lambic. Raspberry lambic dragon fruit. That sounds really interesting. If you're watching on YouTube, you see that right now. That thing looks incredible. I don't know how you say that. And I wish I knew what's in it. I would love to break into the mead cocktail side of life at some point. However, I just haven't gotten there. I can't see. So sad. I can't see the comments. I can't even see what this is. Mead cocktails are really interesting because you can find there's just a lot going on with them in general, and I would just love to break into that world. Texas sweet tea mead. Wow, that looks pretty good. I've made some meads with teas before, and the 2 times, I've done it a couple more times actually. They all turn out okay. The one that I really think of is my experiment mead, and I used too many tea bags in the primary. It just didn't end up being too great, so a little bummed about that. But it was very, very, very spearminty, which is, not great. Here's one guy. He says, potential noob disasters from Friendly Brewer. He says, hi, I'll just put down my first batch of mead today, and I'm already concerned. After about 3 hours of resting, I've noticed a formation of what to be small rods on the surface of the mead mixture. Anybody seen anything like this before? I presume it's some kind of contamination. This, to me, looks like, and for some reason, okay, now it's working, maybe. I can't look at any of the comments, which is frustrating. This looks like to me to be just yeast. And I think when you first start your mead, there are a lot of things happening. The yeast are trying to wake up. Your mixture, whatever you've made, if you put extra things in general, the honey still might be mixing in. There's a lot happening within the first 24 hours. So you kind of have to let things go and don't really worry too much about what's happening. Of course, if something looks just terrifyingly gross, like, oh, something's turning green, or that doesn't seem right, yeah, maybe question. But if it's just, this looks like little, like yeast floated to the top, which is pretty simple. Stalled fermentation. Some of these are really long. I don't necessarily want to go through and read all of them. Ooh, this looks really nice. This guy has a really, really clear mead, which is not the end of the world. If you don't have a clear mead, it's not the end of the world. Don't freak out. But definitely, I definitely like to. Oh my gosh, this one looks crazy. This guy, it's Cafe Sisumel, or it's I guess he's making coffee, a coffee and Capsule mead. So check out this. This is from Ouroboros Panacea. He says, I just started brewing my current batch of mead about 3 weeks ago. I picked it up 15 pounds of locally sourced cranberry honey, and I couldn't quite think of what I wanted to do with it. I know I wanted to make a mead, but I didn't want to make something plain. So I'm sitting thinking. I eventually came up with the recipe. I'm sure it'll be fine in the bottle, whatever. 15 pounds of cranberry honey, 12 scorpion peppers, which are mega hot peppers from what I know, 12 ghost peppers, 12 Carolina Reaper peppers, 5 gallons of spring water, approximately 3 to 4 cups of distilled water, enough to cover the peppers during the boil, 1 liter of cold brew, and 1 cup of raw cane sugar to start the yeast. Holy cow. Again, I can't see the comments, so just the recipe alone on that seems crazy. That's a lot of peppers. I've heard of people using peppers in their mead, but 12 scorpion peppers, 12 ghost, and 12 Carolina Reapers, all of which are extremely hot. Dude's gonna make a friggin' firebomb for his mouth. Holy cow. If you're listening to this Ouroboros Panacea, I would love to know how that turns out at the end. I'm sure he'll put it on the Reddit. So let's see. I'm gonna go one more, and then I'm gonna call this good. New guy, how the heck do I finish off and bottle my mead? Saw a bunch of forums and others saying you can use potassium sorbate, but if you do it, it produces an off flavor and you have to add sulfates. I don't know about that. That's not true. Can someone explain how to stop my fermentation? If you're looking to halt your fermentation, it's as simple as essentially taking whatever your brew is. If you want to just go ahead and be done with the brew and not do anything extra, if it's done fermenting, you can bottle it. So let's say you started your brew in February, it went through the primary, it finished fermenting, it's sat till, let's say, April. You can probably at that point just go ahead and bottle it if you're not looking to back sweeten or anything. If you're looking to back sweeten, you need to add some potassium sorbate to stabilize, or you need to cold crash, halt the yeast, let them drop to the bottom, rack, cold crash. You might be able to get away with that. Or you can pasteurize by heating the mead up to about 140 Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. Caution, and I understand this, some people, I know this is true, water evaporates in room temp, so of course water would evaporate in 140. Alcohol evaporates, I think later, quicker, one of the two. Anyways, alcohol will evaporate if you leave it in too long. So you'll lose maybe 1%, 2% of your ABV if you pasteurize with an open container in any situation. If you keep the container closed and you pasteurize, you shouldn't have any issue with that. Getting up to 140, my only concern with that is I worry about a bottle blowing up if it's not able to handle the pressure. But most beer bottles can. Wine bottles are not intended for pressure, so I would not look at that. Champagne bottles are intended for pressure, so just know what kind of bottle you're using. But you do have to, if you want to back sweeten, stabilize in some manner, unless you've capped out your yeast, in which case there's that. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think. Did you like me going through some of these? Do you want to hear a specific topic about mead making? I would love to chat with you guys. I have lots of plans for future videos and things like that, but this was one I just wanted to put together. So I hope you guys will tune in for some future videos. I'll see you next time, and thanks for tuning in. Cheers.